Hey everyone! In this portrait drawing tutorial, I show you how you can draw a portrait in 5 easy steps from start to finish. You can find all the materials that I used for this portrait in the video description. I already set up my workspace by taping down a piece of Fabriano hot pressed watercolor paper onto a wooden board. Once you have done that as well, we can begin. Step number 1. Start with clean outlines. It's important to have clean outlines to work from at the beginning of the process, and it doesn't matter how you achieve that. You can draw or trace your reference photo. The most important thing is that your outlines are clean and you don't have vague lines like you would have them in a rough sketch, for example. The technique that I apply for realistic drawings requires tidy outlines and nothing else. In this video, I drew the portrait myself, but in many of my artworks, I traced my reference photo to save time. It doesn't matter if you're going for a realistic outcome, how you created the preliminary drawing, so choose what suits you best. If you trace your drawing, you will have perfect outlines everywhere. But if you want to draw it, make sure to have the most accurate outlines in the face area. The rest of the drawing, the outlines of her hair and the upper body, need not be as tidy as the portrait section, because here we will apply a looser style. Here are some tips for you if you are deciding to draw the portrait instead of tracing the reference photo. Draw the outer shape of your portrait roughly and center it onto your paper. Continue by indicating the outlines of the face. Next, position the features of the face, the eyes, nose and mouth. Apply only light pressure, so that you can easily correct lines without having to erase them. When you are happy with the positioning of every element in the portrait, intensify the lines and add details like the irises, pupils, nostrils and some individual hairs of the eyebrows. You need not go overboard with this drawing though. Remember, we just need clean outlines and nothing else. Step number 2. Paint the base colors. You might wonder why we are switching from drawing to painting, even though the video title suggests that we only draw. Well, this is because you don't want to only draw the portrait, believe me here. Of course, if you can't help it, you can just draw the portrait with color pencils only and nothing else. But not only will the result be not as artistically pleasing as the mixed media piece, it will also take you much longer and it might not look as realistic as it could either. You also don't need fancy watercolors. Student-grade watercolors will do the job perfectly well. In this step, we are going to fill in the base colors of the artwork. Doing that with watercolors is just a matter of minutes because we can fill in large areas with color super quickly while creating beautiful effects without putting in any extra effort. Have a look at the reference photo. Do you see the yellow light effects behind the figure and on the figure's face? We are painting these light effects now with a light yellow, so that they look super intense later on when we build up darker layers. This brilliant yellow wouldn't be possible to achieve just with color pencils, because the pigment will always look grainy on the paper texture, and we want to have as little grain from the color pencils as possible. To paint the background, we simply wet the entire space with water and then let spots of blue watercolor bleed into the wet area. We can also add metallic watercolors, for example silver, to give the painting mesmerizing shiny highlights. Next, I paint in her shirt, and as you can see, I indicated with a couple of blue brush strokes with not much effort. The focal point of this painting is the portrait, and keeping the surrounding elements in a loose style won't steal any attention away from the portrait, whilst adding a beautiful painterly style to the artwork. Before we continue to the next step, I want to let you know that you can watch the entire 2 hours and 40 minutes long real-time video of this portrait session on my Patreon page. You can download my high-resolution reference photo and artwork, the ready-to-print-out sketch, and get access to over 100 painting lessons, tutorials and real-time videos. Especially for the more elaborate drawing parts that you will see later, you might want to watch that in real time and follow my technique more closely in order to create a portrait like mine too. Just follow the link in the video description and watch the full video. If you want to learn more, I have lots of tutorials and real-time lessons available for you on my Patreon site, in which I teach you my technique in detail and step by step. And many of my my videos, you even get to see my mixing process in a second camera window, and you can download the reference photo too. If you have seen some of my works and you always wondered how I did them, just visit my website and browse the tutorial section. There you will find a list of all lessons and real-time videos available. Step number 3. Separate highlights from shadows. Now we will continue this technique in the portrait section of this artwork. Here we need to be a little bit more careful and attentive. The main reason we fill in the face area with watercolors too is that we can apply color quick and reach deep layers of the paper, whereas with color pencils we can only add pigments on top of the paper, and it takes very long until we have filled in an area with color. For a realistic portrait we need deep shadows and smooth skin texture without grain, so we are painting in the major skin tones while separating highlights from shadows. The highlights should remain brilliant, so we don't want to accidentally paint over them with a too dark color. We will also paint in the lips, the irises and the lash line. It doesn't have to be perfect yet, we just want to save time and make a base for the drawing part of the process. Step number 4. Refine. Now we are coming to the nitty-gritty part of painting this portrait. This step is the most time-consuming of all steps, because now we will draw the whole portrait in one go. Here it's crucial to compare your drawing constantly to the reference picture. We want to slowly build up all midtones and shadows up to the color values we see on the reference. We can apply a plethora of different colors besides brown tones. Even though the model is black, we can use greens, blues, purples and pinks for depicting her skin. Adding one layer of pigments on top of another one creates a wax-like coat that consists of dozens of different colors, like real skin. At the beginning of this process, try to apply only a little pressure and move your color pencils in tiny circular movements to avoid adding more texture and grain to the paper. Later, after having applied more pigments, you can increase the pressure of your pencil to reach each tiny spot of the paper. Make sure to keep your pencils super sharp while doing this technique. And no, you don't need an expensive pencil sharpener. Mine is from the dollar store. After having built up the values and added the different skin tones of the face as best as we could, we are adding a coat of wax on top of the color pencil pigments. To do that, we are using the Luminance pencils from Caran d'Ache. For this portrait, I use white for the highlights and burnt sienna 10% for the darker areas. We simply go over almost the whole portrait with these pencils, because this removes the grain of the paper. Don't go over dark areas like the lashes though. Now you will see that although everything looks very smooth now, some areas got a bit dull, especially the shadows. Here we are just drawing over them again with the regular color pencils and bringing them back to the desired darker shade. Step number 5. Make it a piece of art. Wow, we have finished the color pencils part. That was exhausting but totally worth it. The face looks lively and realistic, and the wax-based color pencils brought everything together. Let's finish it by filling in the neck with a dark brown watercolor shade and darkening the hair portion so that it matches the color values of the face. We can also add clean contours around her shirt, neck and face to distinguish the foreground from the background. And now there is nothing left to do anymore. Or is there? And is this drawing a piece of art now? Well, not yet in my opinion. Creating a realistic depiction of a photo is just a technique. For me, a good artwork is aesthetically pleasing, makes me happy, and is not just a simple depiction of a photo. So, to make this drawing look more interesting, I added a couple of dynamic elements to it. With a couple of brush strokes of gouache paint, I painted flying blossom leaves. I chose blue and yellow to pick up the colors of the portrait and added pink as a complementary color. Painting these leaves added movement and dynamic to the otherwise rigid portrait. This is a simple yet powerful technique to make your artwork look more interesting. This is only one way to make a more artistically pleasing artwork. There are many different ways to do that. And that's it. This is how the final artwork turned out. I hope you could learn something new in this tutorial and you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next one. Bye bye!